Would you guys call me a poser if I use this mic and it doesn't work, but I just want to use it so I look professional? Let me know in the comments. Working mic or not, doesn't matter. We are here with the first For the Record album review, and we are reviewing a very special album today. Alternative and experimental titan of the rap game, JPEGMAFIA, I Lay Down My Life for You. This is his fifth studio album, coming off his most recent collaboration with Danny Brown, making Scaring the Hoes in 2023, my album of the year, personally speaking. But yeah, let's jump right into this JPEG album. Peggy looks to give us his first solo project since his 2021 release LP. And in the lead up to this album cycle, we were given the first two singles in Don't Rely on Other Men and Sin Miedo. Don't Rely on Other Men being a little bit more dark, having a more like darker aesthetic, while Sin Miedo being a little bit more fun, lighthearted, and danceable. But they both include that classic JPEG trope of having that noise element and that baked into the production there. But another thing that both of these tracks have in common that JPEG didn't really experiment in his past work are the very prominent electric guitars, which I think is a great precursor for the prominence that they will play throughout the entirety of this album. That brings me to the intro of the album, being I scream this in the mirror before I interact with anyone. And in classic JPEG fashion, he gives us the golden opening line, and if I was an NBA player, I'd be Dylan Brooks, but worse. Even while being humorous, though, he gives us a great bit of energy on this track with the grand electric guitar riffs and that like little electronic section towards the end of the song. Moving on, though, we get Sin Miedo, which, in my opinion, is probably the most reminiscent of his work on Scaring the Hoes with that danceability and that like real loud Hoochie Mama sample in there. Moving on, though, we get I'll Be Right There, which has some mellow, glossy synths and a bubbly sound effects in there, which Peggy goes in and gives us probably some of the wittiest punchlines he has on this album, and a very out of nowhere shot at Bronny James. New Black History comes in, though, with Vince Staples in the mix, getting kind of a quirky groove on this track, and actually a future sample of his song Covered in Money as the hook, which I'm not the biggest fan of because it just doesn't have the tastefulness that I think most JPEG vocal samples tend to have. Although I do see this being a very fan favorite at shows with the energy that Peggy and Vince bring on their verses, which are absolutely phenomenally put together and well done. And JPEG kind of has like some tongue-in-cheek, kind of very like direct tone in his voice on his verse. So yeah, it's definitely not a knock on the album by any means, but it's just not my favorite presented track that JPEG gave to us on this album. Then we get Don't Rely on Other Men, which builds a great bit of tension throughout the song, and it does have a different outro than the single version of the song, which I think was a great change up by Peggy. It has very cinematic layered strings as a big payoff from that tension building experience you get in like the first majority of the song. But then moving on from that, we get a Vulgar Display of Power, which is probably, in my opinion, my least favorite track on the song. The go, go, I will not fall part of the chorus just kind of feels like it was taken straight out of like a Power Rangers battle scene, in my opinion. I don't know if I'll get flack for that. And ultimately, I just think JPEG wanted to make a more traditional rock song at the end of the day. So it's not that big of a like the stain on the album, in my opinion. But it doesn't really serve much purpose on this album for me. Never mind that, though, because we're thrown right back into the fire with a dynamic builder and ex-military. As some of you may know, JPEG served some time in the armed forces, so fitting title there. But I think more importantly, as you look at the lyrics heading into the first verse of this song, we get the first bit of direct commentary on this past relationship that JPEG was in. as you'll see progress throughout the rest of the songs in terms of like a lyrical focus for JPEG on this album. But moving on from that, we also get the very poignant line of, "Is you Harvey, Jeffrey, or R. Kelly, or is you opposite?" Which is very on brand, considering all the recent shenanigans that have passed over the course of this year, and just JPEG's overall career-long hate for Drake, as well as there are other Drake-directed bars on this album. With that not being a big focus of what JPEG is trying to do lyrically, it's just something to point out at the end of the day. But entering the third verse on the song Ex-Military, we do kind of get like the JPEG hatred platter, whether it be him pledging his allegiance to his people and rather not for his country, and or him just hating on nepotism, as we saw with the Bronny James bar that I mentioned previously. So he delivers these like this hatred with a bunch of great energy, which I think fits the progression of this song very beautifully, and it just overall makes for a very entertaining listen. Moving on though, we get Jihad Joe, which is a two-parter, with some like edgy sound, with an edgy soundscape, with the ending being some distorted JPEG vocals with these electric guitars in the mix. But keeping things braggadocious, we do get Florida's own Denzel Curry, which he comes out the gate repping Florida on his chest, in his veins, whatever have you, with some just like spoken word over this like snazzy jazz instrumental, almost action movie, spy movie-esque horn-led symphony going on there, and Denzel goes on just to completely rip his verse apart, and with some crazy flows, as well as JPEG on the first beat. There is a bit of an instrumental switch up, which I think I would have more preferred as like its own song, maybe like an interlude type of thing. But content-wise, in terms of the lyrics, it stays pretty on brand for the song. It's just a complete mood change. So just a little minor gripe I may have with that portion of the song. With that switch up in mind, entering these last four tracks on the album, you definitely see a bit of a tone switch or a mood change in the style that JPEG is going for on these final songs. You get the reflective and vulnerable writing on Either Off the Drugs, which Peggy goes on to look back at his discography, and that previously mentioned failed relationship that continues to go on throughout these last final closing tracks. There's a great soul vocal chops in Either On or Off the Drugs as well. It's continuingly, even with a bit of a laid back like maximalist approach, he's not doing that anymore, at least on this song. It still makes for a great entertaining listen, and just shows how skillful JPEG is at working in a DAW. But moving on to the Buzzy Lee feature on Don't Put Anything on the Bible, it still remains cinematic with the momentous guitars that Buzzy Lee is singing over, with a bit of distortion in her vocals as well, that inevitably leads up to this instrumental switch up with more like a laid back guitar lo-fi beat, where JPEG I think provides a little bit of clarity on the track. This album doesn't really provide a whole lot of context to why JPEG is talking so much shit, but at the end of the day, I think that just goes to show like JPEG knows who his audience is for the most part. So this album doesn't necessarily need context, but he does give it to you on this track, as well as just talking about mental health at large. Then we get to the outro of this album, where JPEG, I think, finds himself in a bit of an acceptance stage of those effects that he had from that past relationship that he has talked about throughout the album. And I think overall it just makes for a great atmospheric outro to this project, with that great vocal sample. I believe it's a Janet Jackson sample, but I could be wrong on that. Fact check me, please, in the comments, if you will. Overall, though, when I look at this album through, in terms of JPEG's past discography, it does nothing short of impress me on the production front of things, showing that he's just forever evolving in that aspect. But if there's one thing I will say, I don't think I'll recommend this to anybody who is a first time JPEG Mafia listener. I just think, although there isn't a whole lot of like thought provoking lyrics or a greater big concept on this album, I think your appreciation for the lyrical side, when Peggy does get in that mold, um, will only be enhanced with some added context behind it, whether that be coming from like just knowing him as a person and his past, or just his past work and what he's done to get up to this point. But yeah, with that being said, um, Peggy just, then again, like I said, nothing short of impressive. Really well put together body of work, and ultimately, I'm feeling a for the record rating of a 9.5. So there you guys have it. The first official for the record album review. Let me know if you like this style a little bit more. I'm in the corner of my room now instead of on my desk. So, which is also in the other corner technically, but you can't really tell that I'm in a corner. But anyway, yeah. Let me know if you guys like the style, if you want to see more album reviews. If there's an album that you think I haven't had listened to, or that I have listened to and you want me to review it in the future, let me know. And let me know if you agree on my takes on this new JPEG album, I Lay Down My Life For You. My current album of the year, I'll give that as a bit of a spoiler for right now, but the year is there's still plenty months to go. Still many new Music Fridays. I know JPEG's album dropped on a Thursday, but still many more music to drop. That was English. But yeah, see you guys in the next vid.